I'm Bruce Ames, and I'm the owner, actually I should say caretaker, of this P-47D Thunderbolt, which is an amazing example of what pilots like Bill Dunham flew in the Pacific during World War II.
AOPA keeps flying safe, accessible, and fun by protecting your freedom to fly. We are the most trusted one-stop resource for all things related to general aviation. Become an AOPA pilot today.
When Warren Peach with Dakota Territory Air Museum and Eric Holkoff with AirCorps Aviation and I flew to Australia in 2012 to meet with Rob Greinert, who salvaged this out of Papua New Guinea. And we saw this thing in his hangar. I turned to Eric Holkoff and said, Eric, what are we doing? Can we really bring this back to a flying airplane? I mean, it had been ravaged.
Brought the airplane back. AirCorps Aviation out of Bemidji has done the restoration. They did a magnificent job. It took about 11 years and that much time and that much money. And so the airplane turned out great. The colors that we picked for the airplane are Major Bill Dunham. And this was his third P-47 and the one that he had acquired 15 kills at that time.
Like a lot of guys my age, I had a father in World War II. So I grew up building the airplane models and reading the books and watching the movies and going to air shows to where the warbirds were and everything. And so I really, grew a real attachment to what they represented. And when I got old enough and successful enough in business, I really wanted to get involved and realized I didn't want to be just another one of those guys that buys warbirds and swaps them around like baseball cards. I wanted to bring them back to life, ones that really needed to be restored and shared and flown, and so that people really understand what was going on back then.
The whole restoration, really kind of started 11 years ago, but on the restoration floor is about 6. This is the longest restoration that we've done at AirCorps since I worked there, and it's just like, wow. It's so big and sounds so cool and so different that it was just a thrill. I mean, your heart jumps up into your throat when Bernie took it off. It's a P-47 D-23-RA, and the RA signifies Evansville plant. So the airplane went to, was assembled, degreased, all that, went to Papua New Guinea. What I believe is that it was the first fighter group to have the D-23. This is kind of the hot rod it's the last of the Razorbacks. It went to the 35th Fighter Group, and they flew them for a while in combat, and then the 348th had 3 squadrons like most groups, but they wanted a 4th, so they started the 460th Squadron, and that was this actual airframe, I'm pretty sure. So it was used as a familiarization trainer and so forth after that. So the Bonnie name, it's named after Bill Dunham's, at the time, girlfriend/fiance. And he did his tour, did his P-47 flying, and he then came back, but he married in the interim. And he got a P-51, and that one had a similar name, but it was Mrs. Bonnie.
It has an R2800 Pratt & Whitney in it that is supercharged, but it's also turbocharged, which the turbocharger is the unique thing about a P-47. It allows the airplane to have a higher service ceiling and go faster at altitude without draining the power through the supercharger on the engine. The service ceiling is around 42,000 feet on the airplane, and I believe the top true airspeed is about 428 miles an hour. Over 15,000 P-47s were built during World War II. So there's 3 or 4 Razorback versions flying in the world today, and this is the only one that was built by Republic themselves.
Every time I see this thing fly, because it's a magnificent beast compared to these other planes. And when you see how agile and how fast and maneuverable it is, and you see it when Bernie Vasquez is flying this through an air show, putting it through its paces, you realize that while this was this incredibly powerful ground attack plane and so on, it also was a really effective fighter plane.
Well, what's real significant about this airplane versus most of the other ones out there is at altitude, we get power to the engine by boosting it. So you either have a supercharger, which robs horsepower from the engine to actually drive the supercharger, or you get a turbocharger. This has both. It has a single stage supercharger that's driven on the engine that gets you to 10,000 feet, and then you run out. Then this big massive turbo in the back of it, and there's another lever. So there's a boost lever, a throttle lever, a prop lever, and a mixture. Well, you take that boost lever and you start advancing it, and it closes the wastegates in the exhaust and starts driving the turbo. Now you got free power. The exhaust from the engine is driving the turbo. Now you can go to 30,000 feet and still make the same horsepower I do right here at altitude. That made that airplane a killer. Everybody kind of just assumes it's this big, heavy bomber, and it flies around like a nimble little fighter. It's actually got probably the best ailerons of most of the warbirds out there. It's really nice. It is heavy, so there's that. So the energy management is a little bit bigger challenge, but it is nimble enough and it goes well enough that, you know, it's actually a really nice flying airplane.
For me, the biggest moment was when we got to see this whole fuselage, and it's like, oh my God, there's a real plane coming out of this thing again, when it got to that point. When you see this stuff just component by component coming together, and you realize we're gonna get this thing back to what those pictures of Bill Dunham sitting on the wing, what that thing looked like, that was, every step of the way was exciting. We had the family involved, the family of Bill Dunham's, and someone which just made it even more special. And it was very emotional to see this thing come alive, and really excited about being able to share it now with the rest of the warbird community and the larger community. When we launched that thing, you know, on its original test flight and had everybody around that had been working for 11 years on bringing this thing back to life, it was a real emotional moment.
Well, the coming out party of a project where all the people that have worked on the airplane, from the smallest widgets to the assembly, are standing there and watching their baby go out and fly, is a pretty exciting day.
There are 4 P-47 World War II vet pilots' signatures on the inside of access doors on this airplane, including, well, he ended his career as a general, DeWitt Searles, who took over from Bill Dunham when he went back to the U.S., the 460th Squadron. So it pays tribute to more than just Bill Dunham.
You know, restoring this plane was a major accomplishment on the part of AirCorps Aviation and so on, in my ability to write checks. But I think the thing that really was that topped it all off was getting his family involved. And this is where AirCorps Aviation's historian, Chuck Cravens, really played a big role in tracking down and getting in touch with his family, and getting them involved and hearing their stories that they heard from their father, Bill Dunham, and when they were growing up, and having them be a part of this, and having them be a part of it when we launched it at Oshkosh for everybody. And they were just very emotional, as were we. And getting the people involved and associated with these planes is what makes them relatable. Because it wasn't just about a piece of machinery. These are young men that were, you know, just sent over and put in these planes. You know, they're 19, 20 years old, and they're fighting a war. And these guys had stories, and then came back and built lives and so on, and that makes these planes that much more relatable, and the history that much more relatable to people.